the book is What Happened to You? Conversations on Trauma, Resilience, and Healing. And it's by Dr. Bruce D. Perry and Oprah Winfrey. You may have heard of her. Why did I pick this book? I can't remember how I landed on it. My guess is I was listening to a podcast and somehow it that's usually how things happen. So some podcast was talking about it. And then I listened to like a sample of it and I liked it. And I was initially, I don't know why, but embarrassed that I was picking like an Oprah book because it seems like, I don't know. Like, does anyone else kind of relate that could be embarrassing for some reason?
Yeah. Like, oh, I'm on the bandwagon. And I'm just reading it because of Oprah.
Yeah. Or something. Yeah. And I'm not against Oprah. I never really thought about Oprah, but as it turns out, she's not even surprisingly, she's quite a character, and she's had a very interesting life. And I always like thinking about why people are the way they are and how they got there. And I didn't realize how traumatic this book might be to read even. It's a really hard, it's so like some people just don't get a chance, you know, like their odds are stacked against them right from the start. I was reading this while reading From the Ashes, so I was like really just in emotional turmoil. It was like the same kinds of like childhood stories and trauma and this and that, and it's just turned out to be, it has like kind of a beautiful ending in the saddest way. You expect a lot of tears, everybody, but I think you'll like it. And I always like things to have a bit of a science background, otherwise it feels too, I don't know, I can't trust it. So Dr. Perry, who really specializes in the brain, and he is a psychiatrist that works with children, so like holy.
And not only is he such an insightful and intelligent neuroscientist, but that he doesn't leave his heart at the door, that he really brings a lot of compassion and curiosity and humility to the work that he does. He really tries to understand, at least from the case studies that he includes in the book, like he really tries to not judge and do exactly like what the book title says, which is looking at what happened to you.
So I don't know if that answered why I picked it. It happened. That's what happened.
I like that.
That's what happened.
That's what happened to you.
I like that they called it What Happened to You instead of What's Wrong with You. Like that was one of the things I first picked up on it, that they did it that way. I like that too, because what happened to you that's why you're who you are. Not like there's something wrong with you.
I think also like when we're interacting with people on a daily basis, this comes up because you might have somebody where, let's say you go, I don't know, to the bank. Does anybody go to the bank anymore? Whatever. You go somewhere and the person you're working with is rude or short with you or whatever. And some people were like, oh, what's wrong with that person? But really it's like, wow, maybe they're having a bad day, you know?
Yeah.
Right? Like it's rarely about, when someone is doing something, it's rarely about you. It's more usually about them.
Yeah.
I mean, for some people it's about, you know, depending on how you're acting.
It depends on what you're doing, I guess.
Depends on what you're doing.
But, yeah, that's very true. And then I'm not sure where everybody is in the book, but it gets so interesting in like how the brain is triggered by, like, there's one whole case study about smell. And it's like, you're getting these results out of children. And it could have nothing to do with what you think it has to do with. Like, there's so many factors. And how the brain is triggered by smell, and that made you want to like act out. Well, you'll get there in the book, but anyways.
Isn't there a story about a teacher or something that was dealing with a student, and the student
came down to, I think, deodorant or cologne.
Yeah, and the teacher was wearing the same cologne or deodorant of his father, I think. Yeah. And so then it was that smell that was triggering the student's reason to want to act out and not participate. And so when the teacher changed his cologne, they had a better working relationship, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so interesting. Kids are such a good source because they haven't been fully maybe socialized yet. So they just do, as opposed to like maybe an adult would repress their, acting out and take it out on themselves later or in other facets of their lives. But I thought that was kind of interesting because he works with kids. He sees so much behavior because they're showing you everything. Their cards always showing. Some adults too. Myself included. My cards are often showing if anyone cares to look at them.
It's interesting to think about adults that way too, because some people have such poor emotional regulation and you're kind of like, geez, but it's because they haven't maybe they didn't develop that. Maybe they didn't develop that when they're older. So when people freak out, you could be like, wait. Let's just step back and give you a moment. And also when somebody is, become really angry or explosive and stuff, you can't really, I think this is another important point, is you can't really rationalize with that person until they're regulated. Let's get them regulated and then figure out what's going on.
Yeah, the lesson doesn't come in the moment. The lesson comes when you're calm. Yeah.
It's hard
and that I love how it kind of highlighted that like every behavior, even if the observer doesn't understand, let's say, poor behavior in another individual, that there's always a reason behind individuals' actions, that they stem from somewhere. It's some type of like coping mechanism or fight or flight response. I thought that was really cool too.
My personal goal, like for a couple years now, has been to I often after the fact realize, fuck, that had nothing to do with what I was agitated in the moment about and reactive to. And it takes me sometimes like a week to figure out why I acted that way. And it sits with me because of my brain loves a good problem solve. Until I figure it out, it's like I can't forgive myself for being an asshole until I figure out the why. And I'd love to get that closer together. Well, first of all, I'd like to create like a pause so I don't lash out. And then that would be probably a better first goal. But like, why I act that way, it has nothing to do with like, often case my husband, like he's sometimes the recipient. That was a gift with his purchase. But it has nothing to do with him. You know what I mean?
Do you think it has to do with something in your childhood? I mean, this book is all about how things that happened in our past and our childhood that have affected the way that we react as adults. Do you think that comes from something that happened? Like, you don't have to say what it is. You don't want to share.
No, that's fine. No, I can. I understand why I'm always a little bit on high alert for like my surroundings, like knowing where everyone is in the room, trying to read everyone's face in the room. Meredith touched on this before our last podcast about the glasses. Kind of reading the room is important. And I just run that way. I don't know that there's a maybe different way. And I think it's because I woke up so many times, kind of came to in strange places from a seizure and didn't know and had to, can I trust this place? Can I trust these people? I spent a lot of time with strangers in the hospital with doctors, even though my parents were there and took really good care, there's a lot of stranger danger.
And it's stressful anyway, the seizure. So your body's probably already feeling unsafe, right? Because it's exhausting.
Oh, for sure.
Everything for me breaks down to feeling safe. Like it might present itself as a control issue, but for me, it's a lot about, I don't often feel safe. Yeah.
Book interrupted. Today, I interrupted myself with a 5:45 a.m. wake-up call to attend yoga. So, Karma Brown was right. I went to bed early, and waking up early was super easy. And I also didn't have to sacrifice too much of my own time, like my alone time, the reason that I stay up late, because I was able to watch the season finale of the show I was watching. Luckily, it was the finale, so I did not feel compelled to binge, but I did it. I got up at 5:45 and I went to a 6:30 a.m. yoga class. Booyah.
Book interrupted.
So once I started reading this book, so my daughter had a birthday party yesterday, and I was doing all the things for the birthday party, and I was doing it by myself. And even though we had people that are offering to help me, I'm like, no, I don't need help. I was just doing it. And because I've mentioned my husband before, he's very kind with the way he communicates to me. And I was last night after I said how tired I was, and he said, that's because you don't let anyone help you. And I was like, I know it, but I really didn't need help, and and he was like, I know, but now you're tired.
So
and
you
kind
did.
of cranky. He's like, and all he said, he's like, for some reason you have some sort of block where you don't let people help you. And that's all he said. And then since last night, today, and then reading the book last night before bed, I was like, why do I have that block for people not wanting to help me? And
Why?
I think it's because if people help me, what do they want in return? What are they're giving me?
Oh, there's a
Are they manipulating me?
Ooh.
Are they doing
Yeah,
it for kindness?
so is it-
That's interesting.
Yeah,
'Cause I don't
so
let
are
people
they-
help me either. I'm so bad at that. Like, I have to consciously be like, yes, I will accept your help, and I will accept if it doesn't work out the way that I've carefully planned it in my mind.
Oh, so you guys both have that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I know it's
so
something
anyway,
like,
so
Your mom is kind of like that too, isn't she? Don't you think? Like she's
Yeah.
all, I got to do everything all by myself. I got to get it done. So
Almost to the
it might all
extreme,
stem
yeah.
back to the same person.
maybe.
Right.
I was
Just speculating.
Wonder. Weird.
Could that be?
Yeah. Anyway, so reading this book just makes me, it's like an onion, right? When you have trauma when you're younger, it's like an onion of all the things you do. Like clearly, like when Oprah is like people pleasing, I was like, oh yeah, no, I'm getting over that, blah, blah, blah. But it's like as you read, and I like how it's like a conversation. Do you like how they make it like it's Oprah and him talking? So it makes it kind of like lets your guard down as you're reading it instead of just being like, I'm analyzing. Like it's very, I just really like the way that it flows because it doesn't feel like a medical book, but it also doesn't feel like there's the medical background. So you kind of, or do you know what I mean? I
You
don't know how
trust
to-
it, but it's easy
absolutely.
to digest.
I feel
Yeah.
like it might have been actually something that was played around with. For example, I wonder if Dr. Perry and Oprah had a conversation saying, hey, you know what? We know how the brain works, and that in order for us to move through regulation into relating into reason, in order to tap into that frontal cortex, what can we do in the delivery of our book to help increase the likelihood of an audiobook listener or a reader to be able to take in and absorb as much as we're saying? And a conversation, I think, is a great strategy, whether they did actually have this planning session or not.
I mean,
think
I'm
it's an
sure Dr.
excellent
Perry would
strategy.
apply
Yeah.
that to all his work, really.
Just like,
Wouldn't you? If you knew how the brain works, then you would just use it all the time.
It seems to make
Right.
sense. And you're right. It really makes it so that you don't, because I think some people do have flare ups towards, like I know with myself, you give me a textbook and all of a sudden I'm like, I'm stupid. I don't know how to read this. No, I can't. Because I have in my sorting mechanisms in the filing cabinets, I must have stories in my past around being in school. What is the expectation on how to be a learner? Can you perform well in a test? So the conversational style is really easy peasy. It's like, oh yeah, I'm just listening to people talk.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I disagree with my experience. I really dislike the conversational style.
Oh.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if it would come up or not, but that's one thing that stood out for me from the get-go. I'm almost done the book too. So that's why I'm being kind of extra quiet. Cause I'm like, okay, I don't want to
This is episode
pull in
2, give it
episode
away.
3. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, we're here in episode 1, but yeah, I don't like that. I had a textbook. It's funny. I had a textbook once that was delivered in that way. And I say this in my personal journal. So at the risk of repeating myself, it feels condescending to me. Like, oh, and what does that mean? Could you tell us more? You said this. Why don't you go about and I hate it. It's very,
Like
and that came from your past. What happened to you?
Yeah. And I feel like that might be a manipulation thing too. Like that might come down to feeling manipulated too, because it's like, just tell me. I don't need the song and dance about how, like, it also feels inauthentic, right? Because, and it might be true, it might actually be authentic, but I guess when I'm reading a conversation, it feels inauthentic because of that whole setup, right? Like, okay, here's this story, blah, 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 blah. And then Oprah conveniently like, oh, well, you mentioned this. Could you tell us more about that? Like dragging the story along. And I just, it's not my preferred style of a book. So,
but does it make the most sense for a book by Oprah?
Well,
I said that in my personal journal. It's like, it makes
sense
for the people who love Oprah, who consume Oprah, to consume her in an interview type conversation style.
Totally.
So two good points. I think that I didn't consider Kara's point about how making this information delivered conversationally would also potentially serve the purpose of regulating the reader right away, right? So I think that's
and really relational, and the conversations are relational thing too, right?
And then that is another good point that you make, Mare, because what is Oprah but a conversationalist? Like all of her talk show is like talking. Obviously, it's a talk show, right? She's talking to people, right? So those are two really good points. I still don't like it.
I'm with you.
I love
it wasn't my favorite either.
Share that. That's
y'all are so deep. Like I didn't pick up. I didn't even realize I was reading in conversational style.
That's so funny.
You guys are literally talk about onions. My God.
This story is a conversation.
You guys are you really dissected that onion.
And Sarah said it was like The Onion. I thought she was talking about the satirical newspaper at first. I was like, it's like The Onion. I didn't pick up on that at all.
Serious. Way deep. She's so deep.
I really liked about the book. I mean, I didn't really care either way. Like I didn't love the conversation. I didn't hate it. I mean, the whole book itself is not super my style, but I do appreciate, because I didn't have to deal with trauma. I'm very fortunate in my childhood, and I have a lot of friends who have dealt with trauma in their childhood. And he even says it at the beginning of the book that this is not just a book for people who have dealt with trauma. It's a book for people who have people in their life that have dealt with trauma. And so for me, I mean, I'm only maybe halfway through, but for me, it's been really enlightening being able to, whatever style it is. And I liked the scientific and stuff, but the kind of information of how, this has impacted my friends and family that have gone through trauma, I think has been really great for me to be able to empathize and sympathize and understand more where they're coming from. I think I don't know how you guys feel about that, but
I think, I think that's one of the reasons obviously they said it, but it's one of the reasons these books are good is because it's all about, if somebody who's experiencing trauma needs that relational aspect, it really helps if the person you're having a relationship with understands that when you have these reactions that don't necessarily make sense, it has nothing to do with them. It's something that you're working on. And it's like, sometimes we focus on, like, people might say something like, that person triggered me, but it's not about that person. It's, I got triggered.
Yeah, it's personal.
That person did something. I got
just
triggered.
Like your book, Mare, the nonviolent communication.
Right.
Like, it's like owning.
It's about me.
Yeah.
What am I going through?
Not projecting it.
Not about them.
If you've enjoyed these video highlights, listen to the full episode on our YouTube channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Remember to like and subscribe and ring that bell to be notified when new episodes are published. Find out more by going to www.bookinterrupted.com.
On Book Interrupted. Never forget, every child matters.